The Autobiography of Booker T. Washington, Chapter 16, Part 2.
The love of pleasure and excitement which seems in a large measure to possess the French people impressed itself upon me. I think they are more noted in this respect than is true of the people of my own race. In point of morality and moral earnestness, I do not believe that the French are ahead of my own race in America. A severe competition and the great stress of life have led them to learn to do things more thoroughly and to exercise greater economy. But time, I think, will bring my race to the same point. In the matter of truth and high honor, I do not believe that the average Frenchman is ahead of the American Negro. While so far as mercy and kindness to dumb animals go, I believe that my race is far ahead. In fact, when I left France, I had more faith in the future of the black man in America than I had ever possessed. From Paris we went to London and reached there early in July, just about the height of the London social season. Parliament was in session and there was a great deal of gaiety. Mr. Garrison and other friends had provided us with a large number of letters of introduction, and they had also sent letters to other persons in different parts of the United Kingdom apprising these people of our coming. Very soon after reaching London, we were flooded with invitations to attend all manner of social functions, and a great many invitations came to me asking that I delivered public addresses. The most of these invitations I declined for the reason that I wanted to rest. Neither were we able to accept more than a small portion of other invitations. The Reverend Dr. Brooke Hereford and Mrs. Hereford, whom I had known in Boston, consulted with the American ambassador, the Honorable Joseph Choate, and arranged for me to speak at a public meeting to be held in Essex Hall. Mr. Choate kindly consented to preside. The meeting was largely attended. There were many distinguished persons present, among them several members of Parliament, including Mr. James Bryce, who spoke at the meeting. What the American ambassador said in introducing me, as well as a synopsis of what I said, was widely published in England and in the American papers at the time. Dr. and Mrs. Hereford gave Mrs. Washington and myself a reception at which we had the privilege of meeting some of the best people in England. Throughout our stay in London, Ambassador Choate was the most kind and attentive to us. At the ambassador's reception, I met for the first time Mark Twain. We were guests several times of Mrs. T. Fisher Unwin, the daughter of the English statesman Richard Cobden. It seemed as if both Mr. and Mrs. Unwin could not do enough for our comfort and happiness. Later, for nearly a week, we were the guests of the daughters of John Bright, now Mrs. Clark of Street, England. Both Mr. and Mrs. Clark with their daughter visited us at Tuskegee the next year. In Birmingham, England, we were the guests for several days of Mr. Joseph Sturge, whose father was a great abolitionist and a friend of Whittier and Garrison. It was a great privilege to meet throughout England those who had known and honored the late William Lloyd Garrison, the Honorable Frederick Douglass, and other abolitionists. The English abolitionists with whom we came in contact never seemed to tire of talking about these two Americans. Before going to England, I had no proper conception of the deep interest displayed by the abolitionists of England in the cause of freedom, nor did I realize in the amount of substantial help given by them. In Bristol, England, both Mrs. Washington and I spoke at the Women's Liberal Club. I was also the principal speaker at the commencement exercises of the Royal College for the Blind. These exercises were held in the Crystal Palace, and the presiding officer was the late Duke of Westminster, who was said to be, I believe, the richest man in England, if not in the world. The Duke, as well as his wife and their daughter, seemed to be pleased with what I said and thanked me heartily. Through the kindness of Lady Aberdeen, my wife and I were enabled to go with a party of those who were attending the International Congress of Women, then in session in London, to see Queen Victoria at Windsor Castle, where, afterward, we were all the guests of Her Majesty at tea. In our party was Miss Susan B. Anthony, and I was deeply impressed with the fact that one did not often get an opportunity to see, during the same hour, two women so remarkable in different ways as Susan B. Anthony and Queen Victoria. In the House of Commons, which we visited several times, we met Sir Henry M. Stanley. I talked with him about Africa and its relation to the American Negro, and after my interview with him, I became more convinced than ever that there was no hope of the American Negro's improving his condition by emigrating to Africa. On various occasions, Mrs. Washington and I were the guests of Englishmen in their country homes, where, I think, one sees the Englishman at his best. In one thing, at least, I feel sure that the English are ahead of Americans, and that is that they have learned how to get more out of life. The home life of the English seems to me to be about as perfect as anything can be. Everything moves like clockwork. I was impressed, too, with the deference that the servants show to their masters and mistresses, terms which I suppose would not be tolerated in America. The English servant expects, as a rule, to be nothing but a servant, and so he perfects himself in the art to a degree that no class of servants in America has yet reached. In our country, the servant expects to become, in a few years, a master himself. Which system is preferable? I will not venture an answer. Another thing that impressed itself upon me throughout England was the high regard that all classes have for law and order, and the ease and thoroughness with which everything is done. The Englishman, I found, took plenty of time for eating, as for everything else. I'm not sure if, in the long run, they do not accomplish as much or more than rushing, nervous Americans do. My visit to England gave me a higher regard for the nobility than I had had. I had no idea that they were so generally loved and respected by the classes, nor had I any correct conception of how much time and money they spent in the works of philanthropy, and how much real heart they put into this work. My impression had been that they merely spent money freely and had a good time. It was hard for me to get accustomed to speaking to English audiences. The average Englishman is so serious and is so tremendously in earnest about everything that when I told a story that would have made an American audience roar with laughter, the Englishman simply looked me straight in the face without even cracking a smile. When the Englishman takes you into his heart and friendship, he binds you there as with cords of steel, and I do not believe that there are many other friendships that are so lasting or so satisfactory. Perhaps I can illustrate this point in no better way than by relating the following incident. Mrs. Washington and I were invited to attend a reception given by the Duke and Duchess of Sutherland at Stafford House, said to be the finest house in London. I may add that I believe the Duchess of Sutherland is said to be the most beautiful woman in England. There must have been at least 300 persons at this reception. Twice during the evening the Duchess sought us out for conversation, and she asked me to write her when we got home and tell her more about the work at Tuskegee. This I did. When Christmas came, we were surprised and delighted to receive her photograph with her autograph on it. The correspondence has continued, and we now feel that the Duchess of Sutherland we have one of our warmest friends. After 3 months in Europe, we sailed from Southampton in the steamship St. Louis. On this steamer, there was a fine library that had been presented to the ship by the citizens of St. Louis, Missouri. In this library, I found a life of Frederick Douglass, which I began reading. I became especially interested in Mr. Douglass's description of the way he was treated on shipboard during his first or second visit to England. In this description, he told how he was not permitted to enter the cabin, but had to confine himself to the deck of the ship. A few minutes after I had finished reading this description, I was waited on by a committee of ladies and gentlemen with the request that I deliver an address at a concert which was to begin the following evening. And yet there are people who are bold enough to say that race feeling in America is not growing less intense. At this concert, the Honorable Benjamin B. Odell, Jr., the present governor of New York, presided. I was never given a more cordial hearing anywhere. A large proportion of the passengers were Southern people. After the concert, some of the passengers proposed that a subscription be raised to help the work at Tuskegee, and the money to support several scholarships was the result. When we were in Paris, I was very pleasantly surprised to receive the following invitation from the citizens of West Virginia and of the city near which I had spent my boyhood days. Charleston, West Virginia, May 16, 1899. Professor Booker T. Washington, Paris, France. Dear Sir, many of the best citizens of West Virginia have united in liberal expressions of admiration and praise of your worth and work, and desire that on your return from Europe you should favor them with your presence and with the inspiration of your words. We must sincerely endorse this move, and on behalf of the citizens of Charleston, extend to you our most cordial invitation to have you come to us, that we may honor you who have done so much by your life and work to honor us. We are very truly yours, the Common Council of City of Charleston, by W. Herman Smith, Mayor. This invitation from the City Council of Charleston was accompanied by the following. Professor Booker T. Washington, Paris, France. Dear Sir, we, the citizens of Charleston and West Virginia, desire to express our pride in you and the splendid career that you have thus far accomplished, and ask that we be permitted to show our pride and interest in a substantial way. Your recent visit to your old home in our midst awoke within us the keenest regret that we were not permitted to hear you and render substantial aid to your work before you left for Europe. In view of the foregoing, we earnestly invite you to share the hospitality of our city upon your return from Europe, and give us the opportunity to hear you and put ourselves in touch with your work in a way that will be most gratifying to yourself, and that we may receive the inspiration of your words and presence. An early reply to this invitation, with an indication of the time you may reach our city, will greatly oblige. Yours very respectfully, the Charleston Daily Gazette, the Daily Mail Tribune, G.W. Atkinson, Governor E.L. Boggs, Secretary to Governor, William M.O. Dawson, Secretary of State, L.M. La Follette, Auditor, J.R. Trotter, Superintendent of Schools, E.W. Wilson, Ex-Governor, W.A. McCorkle, Ex-Governor, John Q. Dickinson, President, Kanawha Valley Bank, L. Pritchard, President, Charleston National Bank, G.O.S. Couch, President, Kanawha National Bank, Ed Reed, Cashier, Kanawha National Bank; Geo S. Laidley, Superintendent, City Schools; L.E. McWhorter, President, Board of Education; Chas K. Payne, Wholesale Merchant, and many others. This invitation, coming as it did from the City Council, the state officers, and all the substantial citizens of both races of the community where I had spent my boyhood, and from which I had gone a few years before, unknown in poverty and ignorance, in quest of an education, not only surprised me, but almost unmanned me. I could not understand what I had done to deserve it all. I accepted the invitation, and at the appointed day was met at the railway station at Charleston by a committee headed by ex-Governor W.A. McCorkle and composed of men of both races. The public reception was held in the Opera House at Charleston. The governor of the state, the Honorable George W. Atkinson, presided, and an address of welcome was made by ex-Governor McCorkle. A prominent part of the reception was taken by the colored citizens. The Opera House was filled with citizens of both races, and among the white people were many for whom I had worked when I was a boy. The next day, Governor and Mrs. Atkinson gave me a public reception at the State House, which was attended by all classes. Not long after this, the colored people in Atlanta, Georgia, gave me a reception at which the governor of the state presided, and a similar reception was given me in New Orleans, which was presided over by the mayor of the city. Invitations came from many other places which I was not able to accept.
Hey, it's a privilege to read Up From Slavery, an autobiography of Booker T. Washington with you. Would love it if you could subscribe to the channel, and here are other videos in this playlist for the rest of the autobiography. It would be awesome if you could check out these playlists as well. They might be interesting or funny or something, at least to amuse you for a little bit. Thanks for watching. Until next time.